Millionaire sent his spoiled daughter to live on the ranch as punishment for not wanting to work. But one day, when he visited her, he was horrified. Victoria Thompson, a 23-year-old young woman, woke up to the soft touch of silk sheets on her skin. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of her luxurious penthouse in the heart of the city. With a yawn, she stretched her hand towards the nightstand to reach for her latest model phone. The screen lit up, revealing an avalanche of notifications, invitations to exclusive parties, messages from her supposed friends, and reminders of appointments at luxury spas. With a sigh of boredom, Victoria got out of bed and headed towards her immense walk-in closet. Rows and rows of designer clothes, shoes, and accessories surrounded her. Each garment was a work of art in itself, but for Victoria, they were just more pieces in her endless collection. As she prepared for another day of leisure and excess, her mind wandered to her father, Ernest Thompson, the business magnate whose financial empire had provided Victoria with a life of unimaginable luxury. However, material opulence could not fill the emptiness she felt in her heart. "Miss Victoria, breakfast is served," announced Sophia, the housekeeper, from the other side of the door. "Thank you, Sophia. I'll be down in a moment," replied Victoria, applying the last layer of her expensive makeup. As she descended the marble staircase, Victoria found the dining table set with a feast fit for royalty. Exotic fruits, freshly baked pastries, and a variety of gourmet dishes awaited her. However, the chair at the head of the table, her father's place, was empty. As always, Victoria took a seat and began to pick at her breakfast without much enthusiasm. Her gaze drifted to the portrait of her mother hanging on the wall. Isabella Thompson, a woman of ethereal beauty, had passed away when Victoria was just a child, or at least that's what she had always been told. "Any news from my father?" asked Victoria to Sophia, who was arranging some nearby vases. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson called this morning to inform that he will be out of town on business for the next 2 weeks, responded Sophia with an apologetic tone. Victoria nodded, hiding the pang of disappointment she felt. It was a familiar routine. Her father, always absent, always busy with the empire he had built. After breakfast, Victoria prepared to go out. She had plans to meet her best friend, Danielle, for a day of shopping and relaxation at the city's most exclusive spa. As the chauffeur drove her through the crowded streets, Victoria absent-mindedly observed the outside world. A world that seemed so distant and different from her own. Arriving at the luxury shopping mall, Victoria was greeted by Danielle, a young woman equally privileged and carefree as herself. Together, they spent hours trying on expensive clothes, laughing and gossiping about the latest news in their social circle. "Did you hear about Martin's party this weekend?" asked Danielle, while examining a diamond necklace. "They say it will be the event of the year." Victoria nodded absent-mindedly. "Yes, I received the invitation this morning. I suppose we'll go, right?" "Of course. We can't miss it," exclaimed Danielle with enthusiasm. As they continued their day of shopping, Victoria couldn't shake a feeling of emptiness that haunted her. Each new acquisition, each moment of superficial pleasure, seemed to leave her more unsatisfied than before. As night fell, back in her penthouse, Victoria found herself alone once again, surrounded by luxury, but feeling incredibly lonely. She approached the bar and poured herself a glass of champagne, observing the city lights through the large window. At that moment, her phone vibrated. It was a message from her father. "Victoria, I hope you are well. We'll have to postpone our Sunday dinner. Urgent matters have come up in the company. I'll make it up to you soon. Love, Dad." Victoria let out a sigh of frustration. Another broken promise, another disappointment. As she contemplated the city stretching out before her, she couldn't help but wonder if this was really the life she wanted. Despite having everything materially, she felt empty inside. What Victoria didn't know was that soon, very soon, her glass world would begin to crack, forcing her to face truths that would change her life forever. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of Victoria's luxurious apartment, illuminating the living room where she and Danielle sat, surrounded by shopping bags and half-empty wine glasses. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did between them, but today there was a different tone in the air, a subtle tension that Victoria couldn't quite identify. "So, Vic," began Danielle, fiddling with the edge of her glass, "have you thought about what you'll do for your birthday? You know, the big 24 is approaching." Victoria shrugged, leaning back on the Italian leather couch. "To be honest, I haven't thought about it much. I guess we'll do the usual. An extravagant party, exclusive guests, you know how it is." Danielle nodded, but there was something in her gaze that seemed distant, almost calculating. Sure, although, don't you think it's time to do something different? I mean, you have all the money in the world at your disposal. Why not do something really spectacular?" Victoria frowned, intrigued by the direction the conversation was taking. "What do you have in mind?" "Well," Danielle leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with an emotion Victoria couldn't decipher. "What about organizing a trip? Something truly luxurious and exclusive. We could invite a select group, rent a private yacht, tour the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean." As Danielle continued describing her grandiose vision, Victoria noticed that her friend had left her phone on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a notification, and although Victoria didn't want to be nosy, she couldn't help but take a glance. What she saw left her frozen. It was a message from an unknown number. "Everything is ready for the plan. Victoria doesn't suspect a thing. Soon we'll have access to her. Fortune." Victoria felt as if the world had stopped. Her mind began to spin, trying to process what she had just read. Was it possible? Her best friend, the person she trusted most after her father, was planning to betray her. With her heart racing, Victoria quickly excused herself, claiming she needed to use the bathroom. Once there, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily. It couldn't be true. There had to be an explanation. But the doubt had already been planted in her mind, and she couldn't ignore it. With trembling hands, Victoria took out her own phone and dialed the number of her personal lawyer. "Carlos, I need you to investigate something for me. It's urgent and must be discreet," whispered Victoria on the phone, quickly explaining what she had seen. When she returned to the living room, Victoria made a superhuman effort to maintain her composure. Danielle was still talking animatedly about the birthday plans, completely unaware of the whirlwind of emotions unleashed inside her friend. "Sounds wonderful, Danny," said Victoria, forcing a smile. "Why don't you send me some more details later? I'm a bit tired now." Danielle seemed surprised by the sudden change, but nodded. "Sure, no problem. Are you okay, Vic? You look a bit pale." Yes, I just need to rest a bit," responded Victoria, accompanying Danielle to the door once alone. Victoria collapsed on the couch, her mind spinning with unanswered questions. How was it possible that Danielle, her confidant, her adventure companion since childhood, could be planning something like this? Was their entire friendship a farce? The following days were an agony for Victoria. She kept up appearances, continuing her usual routine of shopping, parties, and outings with friends, including Danielle. But each smile, each laugh, each hug felt like a stab in the heart. Finally, a week later, Carlos contacted her with the results of his investigation. Victoria met with him in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from the curious eyes of her social circle. "I'm sorry, Victoria," began Carlos, his expression grave, "but the results are conclusive. Danielle has been conspiring with a group of people to access your fortune. They've been planning this for months, maybe years." Victoria felt as if the ground was opening up beneath her feet. Despite having suspected the truth, hearing it confirmed was devastating. "Who else is involved?" she asked in a trembling voice. Carlos hesitated before responding. "Victoria, I'm afraid the list includes several of your closest friends, people you've considered trustworthy for years." As Carlos continued, detailing the extent of the betrayal, Victoria felt her world crumbling. Each name mentioned was like a direct blow to her heart. People with whom she had shared laughter, secrets, intimate moments, all had been playing a role, waiting for the opportune moment to take advantage of her. Suddenly, the opulence that surrounded her, the luxuries she had always taken for granted, felt empty and meaningless. How many of her relationships were genuine? Did anyone truly appreciate her for who she was, beyond her last name and bank account? That night, back in her penthouse, Victoria found herself in front of the mirror of her luxurious vanity. The image staring back at her was that of a stranger. A beautiful young woman, impeccably groomed but with eyes full of pain and confusion. For the first time in her life, Victoria wondered who she really was beneath all that facade of wealth and privilege. What would be left of her if all the material things were taken away? As tears began to fall, staining her expensive makeup, Victoria made a decision. She couldn't continue living like this, surrounded by falsehood and betrayal. She needed a change, she needed to find herself. With trembling hands, she opened her computer and began to search. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she knew she needed to escape, to get away from everything and everyone. It was then that her eyes fell on an image, an old family ranch that her father had mentioned once, located in a remote rural region, a place forgotten by time, far from the glamour and lies of the city. Without thinking twice, Victoria picked up her phone and dialed her father's number. It was time to face the truth, to seek answers and perhaps to find herself in the process. What Victoria didn't know was that this decision would not only take her away from the life she knew, but would also lead her to discover family secrets that would change her perspective forever. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon when Victoria arrived at the family ranch. The dirt road leading to the property was full of potholes, shaking the luxurious car in which she was traveling. As they approached, Victoria could make out the silhouette of a large and old house, surrounded by fields and centuries-old trees. The driver, an older man named Ramon, who had worked for the Thompson family for decades, stopped the car in front of the main entrance. "We have arrived, Miss Victoria," announced Ramon, looking at her through the rearview mirror with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Victoria nodded, taking a deep breath before opening the car door. The fresh morning air hit her, so different from the air conditioning she was used to in the city. The sounds of nature surrounded her, the singing of birds, the rustle of leaves moved by the wind, the distant mooing of some cows. As Ramon unloaded her luggage, Victoria observed the ranch with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The main house was large, but nothing compared to the mansion she had grown up in. The adobe walls were weathered by time, and the paint was peeling in some places. However, there was a rustic beauty in its simplicity that Victoria couldn't help but appreciate. A middle-aged woman came out to greet her. She had grey hair pulled back in a simple bun and wore an apron over a modest dress. "Welcome, Miss Victoria," the woman greeted with a kind smile. "I'm Carmen, the housekeeper. I hope you had a good trip." Victoria nodded, trying to return the smile. "Thank you, Carmen. The trip was interesting." Carmen laughed softly. "I imagine you're not used to such bumpy roads. Come, I'll show you to your room so you can freshen up." As she followed Carmen into the house, Victoria couldn't help but notice the differences from her home in the city. The floors were old wood that creaked under her feet. The walls were decorated with black and white photographs and paintings of local landscapes. There was no marble, no crystal, no expensive works of art. Her room was simple but cozy, with a wrought-iron bed, a wooden wardrobe, and a small table with a pitcher of fresh water. The window overlooked the fields, stretching as far as the eye could see. "Breakfast is served in an hour, miss," informed Carmen. "But if you need anything before then, don't hesitate to ask." Once alone, Victoria sat on the bed, feeling the firm mattress beneath her weight. It was so different from her king-size bed with a luxury mattress in the city. She looked at her expensive suitcase, filled with designer clothes and pricey accessories, and suddenly felt out of place. She decided to take a quick shower before breakfast. Upon entering the bathroom, she was surprised to see that there was no whirlpool tub or multi-jet shower, just a simple shower with a plastic curtain. As the water fell over her, Victoria closed her eyes and let the reality of her situation sink in. She was far from everything she knew, in a place that seemed plucked from another era. And somewhere, nearby, her mother could be stepping out of the shower. Victoria faced another dilemma. What to wear? All her clothes seemed ridiculously ostentatious for this environment. Finally, she opted for simple jeans and a white t-shirt, the most casual items she could find in her wardrobe. When she came down, for breakfast she found a table filled with foods she had never seen at her usual breakfast. Fresh eggs, handmade tortillas, beans, and a variety of local fruits. "Everything okay, miss?" asked Carmen, noticing the bewildered expression on Victoria's face. "Yes, it's very different from what I'm used to," admitted Victoria. Carmen smiled understandingly. "I understand, but I assure you everything is fresh and delicious. Why don't you try a bit of everything?" Victoria nodded and began to serve herself, surprising herself by discovering that indeed everything tasted incredibly good. As she ate, Carmen explained the daily functioning of the ranch. "The workers arrive at dawn. We have crop fields, livestock, and a small orchard. If you're interested, you can help with some tasks. Many find that manual work is rewarding." Victoria nearly choked on her orange juice at the suggestion. Her working in the field? It was an absurd idea. However, a small part of her felt intrigued by the possibility. After breakfast, Victoria decided to explore the surroundings of the ranch. She walked through the fields, observing the workers toiling at their daily tasks. Some greeted her with a smile or a nod, others looked at her with curiosity. As she walked, Victoria couldn't stop thinking about her mother. Had she walked these same fields? Had she found peace in this simple but beautiful place? Arriving at a small stream that crossed the property, Victoria sat on a rock, taking off her shoes to dip her feet in the cool water. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft murmur of the water and the singing of the birds. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. There was no pressure to keep up appearances, no expectations. To meet here in this place far from everything, Victoria realized she had the opportunity to discover who she really was, without the layers of luxury and privilege that had always defined her. As the sun rose in the sky, Victoria made a decision she would stay at the ranch. At least for a while she would learn about life here, search for her mother, and perhaps in the process, find herself. What she didn't know was that this new beginning would bring challenges she had never imagined and transform her in ways she never thought possible. The weeks passed quickly at the ranch, and Victoria found herself immersed in a world completely different from the one she had known all her life. Each day brought new challenges and learnings, some more difficult than others. One morning, Victoria was awakened by the crowing of a rooster much earlier than she would have ever gotten up in the city. Still groggy, she went down to the kitchen where she found Carmen preparing breakfast for the workers. "Good morning, Miss Victoria," greeted Carmen with a smile. "Would you like to help in the kitchen today?" Victoria hesitated for a moment. She had never cooked in her life. She had always had chefs at her disposal, but something in Carmen's warmth encouraged her to nod. "I'd love to, but I must warn you that I have no idea how to cook," admitted Victoria, feeling a bit embarrassed. Carmen laughed softly. "Don't worry, we all start without knowing. Come, I'll teach you how to make tortillas." For the next hour, Victoria learned how to mix the dough, shape the tortillas with her hands, and cook them on the comal. Her first attempts were disastrous, misshapen tortillas, too thick or burnt. But with Carmen's patience and guidance, she slowly improved. When she finally managed to make a decent tortilla, Victoria felt a surge of pride she had never experienced with any of her expensive purchases or extravagant parties. It was a new and exciting feeling. After breakfast, Victoria decided to join the workers in the field. The foreman, Don Miguel, a man in his 60s with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes, assigned her the task of helping with the tomato harvest. The sun was relentless, and Victoria soon found herself sweating profusely, her hands aching from the unusual work. Several times she was on the verge of giving up, but the shame of being the only one unable to do the job kept her going. "Don't get discouraged, miss," Don Miguel told her during a break. "No one is born knowing the important thing is not to give up." Those words resonated with Victoria. All her life, she had given up on anything that required real effort. It had always been easier to pay for others to do things for her. But here in this field, under the scorching sun, she was learning the value of hard work. As the days passed, Victoria found herself gradually adapting to life on the ranch. Her hands, once soft and delicate, began to harden with calluses. Her sun-tanned skin no longer needed the expensive makeup she was used to. One afternoon, while helping to milk the cows, Victoria found herself chatting with Lucia, a young worker at the ranch. Lucia was about the same age as Victoria, but their lives couldn't be more different. "How do you know how to do so many things?" asked Victoria, admiring the skill with which Lucia handled the milking. Lucia smiled. "I grew up here on the ranch. My parents taught me everything I know. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new." Victoria reflected on those words. In her previous life, each day was the same as the one before, filled with luxuries but empty of purpose. Here, on the other hand, she felt that she was growing, learning, changing. "And you've never wanted to?" "I don't know. Leave? See the city?" asked Victoria, curious. Lucia shrugged. "Sometimes I think about it, but here I have my family, my community. I have a purpose. I wouldn't trade that for anything." That night, lying in her simple bed, Victoria couldn't sleep. Lucia's words resonated in her mind. What had been her purpose in life until now? Spending money, attending parties. For the first time, she realized how empty her existence had been. The next morning, Victoria got up with a new determination. She approached Don Miguel and asked him to teach her more about the workings of the ranch. "I want to learn everything," said Victoria, "how the land is cultivated, how the livestock is cared, for how everything is managed." Don Miguel looked at her with a mix of surprise and approval. "Very well, Miss Victoria. We'll start today." The following days were a whirlwind of new experiences. Victoria learned to plant seeds, to recognize when crops were ready to be harvested, to care for sick animals. Every night she fell exhausted into bed, but with a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced before. One afternoon, while helping to repair a fence, Victoria cut her hand on a wire. In the past, she might have cried or complained about the pain, but now she simply cleaned the wound and kept working. "You're changing, Miss Victoria," commented Don Miguel, observing her with approval. "You're becoming strong." Victoria smiled, realizing it was true, not only physically but mentally as well. She was no longer the spoiled and capricious young woman who had arrived at the ranch weeks ago. However, despite all these positive changes, Victoria couldn't forget the original reason for her trip. Her mother remained a mystery, and although she had discreetly asked around in the nearby town, no one seemed to have any information about her. One night, while dining with Carmen and some of the workers, Victoria finally decided to address the subject directly. "Carmen," she began, "have you ever heard of a woman named Isabella Thompson?" The silence that followed her question was deafening. Carmen and Don Miguel exchanged glances, and Victoria instantly knew she had touched on a sensitive topic. "Why do you ask about her, miss?" inquired Don Miguel cautiously. Victoria took a deep breath. "Because she's my mother, and I think she might be living near here." Carmen's eyes widened. "Your mother? But we thought that she was dead," finished Victoria. "I thought so too until recently." Don Miguel slowly rose from the table. "I think it's time for you to know the whole truth, Miss Victoria. Come with me." With her heart pounding, Victoria followed Don Miguel out of the house. They walked in silence under the starry sky, moving away from the main house and heading towards a small cabin at the edge of the property. As they approached, Victoria could see a faint light shining through the windows. Don Miguel stopped in front of the door and knocked softly. "Isabella," he said, "there's someone here who needs to see you." The door opened slowly, and Victoria found herself face to face with a woman who was both a stranger and a reflection of herself. Dark hair with some greys, eyes the same color as her own, and an expression of astonishment that surely mirrored her own. "Victoria?" whispered the woman, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mum," responded Victoria, feeling the world around her fade. At that moment, mother and daughter melted into an embrace, years of separation and secrets dissolving in an instant of pure connection. Victoria knew that this encounter would change everything. The questions she had kept for years could finally be answered. But more than that, she felt that she had finally found a missing piece of herself. As tears streamed down her cheeks, Victoria realized that her journey of self-discovery was just beginning. With her mother by her side, she was ready to face whatever truths the future might reveal. The interior of the small cabin was cozy and simple, very different from the opulence Victoria had been accustomed to all her life. Isabella guided them to a worn wooden table where she served them tea in mismatched cups. Victoria couldn't stop staring at her mother, searching her features for echoes of her own image. There was so much she wanted to ask, so much she needed to understand. Why? Was the first word Victoria managed to articulate, her voice barely a whisper. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she opened them again, Victoria saw in them a mixture of pain and determination. "Oh, my child," began Isabella, her voice laden with emotion. "I never wanted to leave you. It was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life." Victoria listened in silence as her mother told a story that contradicted everything she had believed she knew about her childhood. Isabella spoke of the early years of marriage to Ernest, filled with love and hope, of how, little by little, success in business began to change her father, making him more obsessed with money and status. "When you were born," continued Isabella, "I swore I would give you a life filled with love and values, not just material luxuries, but your father. He had other ideas." Isabella recounted the increasingly frequent arguments, the irreconcilable differences about how to raise Victoria. Ernest wanted his daughter to grow up in a world of privilege, preparing her to inherit his business empire. Isabella, on the other hand, wanted a simpler life, focused on family and human values. "The night I left," said Isabella, her voice cracking, "your father gave me an ultimatum. Either I accepted his vision for your future, or I left. He told me that if I chose to leave, I would never be able to see you again." Victoria felt her heart constrict at the pain evident in her mother's voice. "But why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you try to contact me when I grew up?" Isabella took Victoria's hands in hers. "I tried. My love for years, I sent letters, tried to communicate. But your father, he controlled everything. My letters never reached you. My calls were blocked. Over time, I convinced myself that it was better for you not to know the truth, not to have to choose between your parents." Victoria felt a mix of emotions, anger towards her father for hiding the truth, pain for the lost years with her mother, and a deep sadness for all that both had suffered. "And how did you end up here, at the ranch?" asked Victoria. Isabella smiled weakly. "This ranch belonged to my parents, your grandparents. When I left the city, this was the only place I could think of coming to Don Miguel and Carmen, who had worked for my parents, welcomed me and helped me settle here." Victoria nodded, recalling Don Miguel and Carmen's reaction when she asked about her mother. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. "All these years," said Victoria, "I've lived a life I thought was perfect but was empty. And you've been here so close and yet so far." Isabella gently stroked her daughter's cheek. "I know, my child, and you don't know how sorry I am, but now you're here, and if you'll allow me, I'd like to be part of your life." Victoria felt tears returning to her eyes. "That's all I want, Mom. To know you, to learn from you, to make up for lost time." Mother and daughter embraced again, this time with the promise of a new beginning. Victoria knew she had much to process, much to forgive, but she also felt a hope she had never experienced before. As the night progressed, Victoria and Isabella continued to talk, sharing stories of their separate lives. Victoria told her mother about her life in the city, her false friends, and how the discovery of the betrayal had led her to the ranch. Isabella listened attentively, her heart aching for the difficulties her daughter had faced, but also feeling pride in the strength and determination Victoria had shown. "Victoria," said Isabella, when the conversation came to a natural pause, "I know you've discovered a lot in a short time. What do you plan to do now?" Victoria looked out the cabin window, observing the starry sky. Her life had taken a complete turn in a matter of weeks. The spoiled and superficial young woman who had arrived at the ranch no longer existed. "I think," began Victoria slowly, "I want to stay here at least. For a while, I want to learn more about this life, about who I really am, when I'm not surrounded by luxuries. And more than anything, I want to get to know you, Mom." Isabella smiled, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "Nothing would make me happier, my love." As mother and daughter continued their conversation late into the night, Victoria felt that she had found a part of herself she didn't even know was missing. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy. She would have to face her father, reconcile her past with her present, and decide what kind of future she wanted to build. But for the first time in her life, Victoria felt truly at peace. Here, in this simple cabin, with her newly discovered mother, she had found a sense of belonging that no amount of money or luxury could have provided. As dawn approached, Victoria knew she was on the verge of a new chapter in her life. A chapter filled with challenges, but also with love, growth, and authenticity. And she was ready to face it, with her mother by her side, and a new understanding of who Victoria Thompson really was. The days following the reunion with her mother were a whirlwind of emotions for Victoria, sir. Spent every free moment with Isabella, absorbing stories of her past, learning about her family roots, and most importantly, forging a bond that had been denied for so many years. However, Victoria knew she couldn't escape reality forever. One morning, while helping her mother in the small garden behind the cabin, her phone, which had remained silent for weeks, began to ring insistently. With a sigh, Victoria saw her father's name on the screen. The time had come to face the truth. "Dad," answered Victoria, her voice firm but laden with emotion. "Victoria? Where have you been? I've been trying to contact you for weeks." Ernest's voice sounded worried and a bit angry. "I'm at the ranch, Dad, and I've discovered the truth," said Victoria, looking at her mother, who had approached upon hearing the conversation. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Ernest spoke again, his voice sounded defeated. "So you found her?" "Yes, I found Mom. How could you lie to me all these years, Dad? How could you keep me away from her?" Victoria heard her father sigh deeply. "Victoria, I made mistakes. I believed I was doing what was best for you, for our future. What was best for me, or what was best for your business empire?" challenged Victoria. "We need to talk, daughter, face to face. Can I come to the ranch?" asked Ernest. Victoria looked at her mother, seeking her approval. Isabella nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad, come tomorrow. There's a lot we need to discuss." The next morning dawned cloudy, as if the sky reflected the tension that permeated the ranch. Victoria woke up early, her nerves on edge at the imminent arrival of her father. Isabella waited for her in the kitchen of the main house with a cup of hot tea. "Are you ready for this, my child?" asked Isabella, her voice soft but firm. Victoria nodded, taking a sip of tea. "I have to be. Too many years of lies and secrets have passed. It's time for everything to come to light." The sound of a car approaching on the dirt road announced Ernest's arrival. Victoria and Isabella stepped out onto the porch, watching the luxurious vehicle clash with the rustic surroundings of the ranch. Ernest Thompson emerged from the car, his impeccable suit covered in dust from the road. For a moment he seemed disoriented, as if he couldn't believe where he was. Then his eyes fell on Victoria, and finally on Isabella. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Hello, Ernest," responded Isabella, her tone neutral but her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. Victoria stepped forward. "Dad, I think we have a lot to talk about." The three headed inside the house, sitting around the kitchen table. The contrast between Ernest, with his expensive suit and rigid posture, and Isabella and Victoria, dressed in simple, comfortable clothes in the rural setting, couldn't be more evident. "So," began Ernest, breaking the tense silence, "I suppose you know everything now." Victoria nodded. "I know you lied to me for years, that you pushed Mom away from me, that you manipulated my entire life to fit your vision of what it should be." Ernest closed his eyes for a moment, as if his daughter's words were physical blows. "Victoria, you have to understand everything I did thinking of your future." "My future?" interrupted Victoria, her voice rising. "Do you mean turning me into a young version of you? Someone obsessed with money and power, incapable of valuing the truly important things in life?" Isabella put a hand on Victoria's arm, calming her. "Ernest," she said, addressing her ex-husband, "do you realize the damage you've caused, not only to me but to our daughter?" Ernest looked at Isabella, and for a moment, Victoria saw a flash of the man he had once been, before success and ambition consumed him. "I know," he finally said. "I was wrong, terribly wrong." "Why, Dad?" asked Victoria, her voice softer now. "Why was it so important to you that I follow in your footsteps?" Ernest sighed deeply. "Because I was afraid, Victoria. Afraid of losing everything I had built. Afraid that if I didn't prepare you to take the reins of the business, it would all fall apart. And in the process, I forgot what was most important, your happiness." Tears began to run down Ernest's cheeks, something Victoria had never seen before. "I'm sorry," he said, looking first at Isabella and then at Victoria. "I'm so sorry. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but if you give me the chance, I'd like to try to make amends." Victoria looked at her mother, seeking her reaction. Isabella's eyes were filled with tears, but her expression was serene. "Ernest," she said softly, "you've made terrible mistakes. You've hurt us both in ways you can't imagine. But you're also Victoria's father, and if she's willing to give you a chance, I won't oppose it." All eyes turned to Victoria. She felt a whirlwind of emotions inside: anger, sadness, confusion, but also a glimmer of hope. She looked at her father, seeing for the first time the vulnerable man behind the facade of power and success. "Dad," began Victoria, carefully choosing her words, "what you did was wrong. You deprived me of my mother. You raised me in a world of lies and superficiality. But these last few weeks at the ranch have taught me the value of forgiveness and the importance of family." Victoria took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm willing to give you a chance, but with conditions. First, I want you to publicly acknowledge that Mom is alive and explain why you lied all these years. Second, I want you to donate a significant portion of your fortune to charitable causes that truly make a difference in people's lives. And third, I want you to spend time here at the ranch, away from business and luxury. You need to remember what's really important in life." Ernest seemed stunned for a moment, but then nodded slowly. "I'll do it," he said, in a hoarse voice. "I'll do whatever it takes to make amends for my mistakes and get my family back." Isabella smiled softly, extending her hand to take Victoria's. "I'm proud of you, my child," she whispered. The three remained silent for a moment, the weight of the decisions made and the changes to come floating in the air. Victoria knew that the road to reconciliation and healing would be long and difficult, but for the first time in her life, she felt that she was making the right decisions. As the sun began to filter through the clouds, illuminating the kitchen with a warm glow, Victoria felt a sense of peace and purpose she had never experienced before. She knew her life would never be the same again, but she was ready to face the future with her parents by her side and a new understanding of who she really was. 6 months had passed since that tense day in the ranch kitchen. The change in Victoria's life and her family was palpable, as if the very air they breathed was different. Victoria woke up with the crowing of the roosters, a routine she had grown accustomed to and now appreciated. She dressed in simple but comfortable clothes and left the main house towards the fields. On the way, she met her father, Ernest, who was returning from feeding the horses. His face, once always tense and serious, now showed a relaxed smile. The tan of his skin and the dirt stains on his clothes revealed the radical change in his lifestyle. "Good morning, daughter," greeted Ernest, giving Victoria a hug. "Ready for another day of work?" Victoria nodded, smiling. "Always. Dad, is Mom already in the orchard?" "Yes," she said. She wanted to take advantage of the morning freshness to plant some new herbs. Together, father and daughter headed towards the orchard, where they found Isabella kneeling among the plants, her hands buried in the rich soil. She looked up when she heard them approaching, her face lighting up with a smile. "My two favorite workers," joked Isabella. "Come, there's a lot to do today." As they worked together in the orchard, Victoria couldn't help but reflect on how things had changed. Her father, the once powerful business magnate, now found satisfaction in manual labor and simple living. He had kept his word. He donated a large part of his fortune to various charitable causes, publicly confessed the truth about Isabella, and committed to spending most of his time at the ranch. The change had not been easy for Ernest. There were days of frustration, moments when the call of his old life seemed irresistible. But with the support of Victoria and Isabella and the patient guidance of Don Miguel, Ernest had discovered a new version of himself, one that valued connection and simplicity above power and wealth. Isabella, for her part, had blossomed upon having her family reunited. Although the wounds of the past would take a long time to fully heal, she had found in her heart the strength to forgive and the will to build a new future together. And Victoria, she had undergone the most profound transformation of all. The spoiled and superficial young woman who had arrived at the ranch months ago no longer existed. In her place was a strong, compassionate, and determined woman who had discovered her true purpose in life. As they planted together, Victoria shared with her parents her plans for the future. "I've been thinking," she began, "about how we can use our resources and experiences to help others." Ernest and Isabella looked at her with interest, encouraging her to continue. "I want to create a foundation," explained Victoria. "One that helps young people from privileged backgrounds connect with their roots, discover the value of hard work, and understand the importance of giving back to the community." "That sounds like a wonderful idea, my child," said Isabella, her eyes shining with pride. Ernest nodded thoughtfully. "We could use part of the ranch's land for that, create an immersion program, similar to what you experienced." Victoria smiled, excited by her parents' support. "Exactly. And not only that, I also want the foundation to support rural communities, helping them develop sustainable projects and preserve their traditions." As they discussed the details of the project, Victoria realized how much her perspective had changed. She no longer saw money and power as ends in themselves, but as tools to generate a positive impact in the world. As the sun rose in the sky, the Thompson family took a break from their work in the orchard. They sat on the porch of the house, enjoying fresh lemonade made with lemons from their own trees. "Victoria," said Ernest, his voice soft but serious, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've grown in ways I never imagined, and you've taught me more than I could have ever taught you." Isabella took her daughter's hand. "You've found your path, my love, and you've helped us find ours in the process." Victoria felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness and gratitude. "I love you both," she said, hugging her parents. "Thank you for giving me the chance to discover who I really am." As the trio observed the landscape of the ranch, with its green fields and blue sky stretching to the horizon, Victoria knew she had found her place in the world, not in the luxurious halls of high society, but here, with her hands in the soil and her heart full of purpose. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. She knew there would be challenges ahead, that the road would not always be easy, but with the love of her family, the strength she had discovered in herself, and the determination to make a difference in the world, Victoria was ready to face anything that came her way. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, the Thompson family remained united on the porch, grateful for the present and hopeful for the future. Victoria closed her eyes, breathing deeply the fresh country air, and knew with certainty that this was the life she was meant to live. At that moment, surrounded by her parents' love and the beauty of nature, Victoria Thompson realized that she had found something far more valuable than any material wealth. She had found her true self, her purpose, and a love for life that no amount of money could buy. And so, with a full heart and a peaceful spirit, Victoria prepared to write the next chapter of her life, a life transformed by the power of love, truth, and connection with what